What if the very foundations of a religion you hold dear were challenged by those who claim to be its most devout followers? What if extremists arose from within, not from outside? This is the story of the Kharijites, the first terrorists in Islam. In a time when Islam was still in its formative years, a group of zealots rose from within the ranks of the Muslim community, believing they alone represented the true path of Islam. But in their fierce desire to purify the religion, they ultimately became a source of division, conflict, and chaos. The Kharijites, whose name means those who seceded, represent a critical moment in Islamic history, a warning from the past about the dangers of extremism and the consequences of a rigid, unyielding interpretation of faith. Today, we're diving into a topic that shaped the future of Islam in profound ways: the rise of the Kharijites. Who were they? What motivated them to take up arms against their fellow Muslims? And what lasting impact did they have on the unity of the Muslim Ummah? The Kharijites were among the first groups in Islamic history to espouse violence as a tool to enforce their interpretation of Islam. Their story is a tragic one, but it's also one filled with lessons that resonate powerfully in today's world of religious extremism. In this video, we'll explore the origins of the Kharijites, their role in the early days of Islam, the theological and political disputes that led to their rebellion, and how their rise to prominence sowed the seeds of extremism within the Muslim community. We'll also reflect on the lessons that we, as modern Muslims, can learn from this chapter of history. By the end of this video, you'll gain a deeper understanding of how internal divisions, fueled by zealotry, can threaten the unity of a community, and how crucial it is to prevent history from repeating itself. To understand the origins of the Kharijites, we must first look at one of the most pivotal moments in early Islamic history, the Battle of Siffin. In the year 657 CE, the Islamic world was torn by a civil war between the forces of Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib and those loyal to the governor of Syria, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. What was initially a struggle for political leadership quickly escalated into a conflict of ideological and theological proportions. As the battle raged on, both sides reached a stalemate, and the conflict was resolved through a peace agreement known as the arbitration. But this decision, made by representatives of both sides, was a turning point. The Kharijites, originally supporters of Ali, rejected the idea of arbitration. They believed that only God, and not human beings, could decide the outcome of the conflict. They viewed the act of arbitration as a betrayal of Islam's divine authority. The Kharijites' rejection of arbitration was not merely political, it was deeply theological. In their view, the fact that Ali, the rightful successor of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, agreed to arbitrate with a non-Muslim, Muawiyah, was a clear sign of weakness and a failure to uphold God's law. This stance led them to take up arms against their fellow Muslims, declaring that anyone who did not adhere to their strict interpretation of Islam was an apostate, worthy of death. The Kharijites became infamous for their uncompromising stance on purity. They believed that anyone who committed a sin was an unbeliever and should be punished. They took the Quranic verses about jihad to an extreme, using them as justification for violence against those they deemed impure. Their strict adherence to a literal interpretation of Islam, combined with a militant zeal, made them the first radical extremist group in Islamic history. One of the most significant figures in the Kharijite movement was a man named Abd al-Rahman ibn Muljam, who would later assassinate Ali, the fourth caliph of Islam, further deepening the rift within the Muslim world. The assassination marked the beginning of a series of violent acts committed by the Kharijites, as they continued to spread their belief that only through purging the Muslim community of sinners could true Islam be restored. The impact of the Kharijite movement was far-reaching. The assassination of Ali led to the end of the Rashidun Caliphate and the beginning of the Umayyad dynasty. The seeds of sectarianism had been sown, and the Kharijites' rigid interpretation of Islam would leave a legacy of division and violence within the Muslim community. After the assassination of Ali, the Kharijites were not a single unified group. The movement fractured into several factions, each claiming to be the true defenders of Islam. Despite their violent origins, some of these groups sought to carve out their own political and theological paths, while others continued to hold fast to the radical ideas that had fueled their rebellion. The most notable of these factions were the Azarika, the Sufriya, and the Ibadiyya. While the Azarika were the most extreme, advocating for the killing of anyone they deemed to be an unbeliever, the Ibadiyya sought a more moderate path, emphasizing a strict but peaceful adherence to their version of Islam. The splintering of the Kharijites reflects a deeper ideological issue. When a movement is based on an unyielding interpretation of religious purity, it often leads to division and internal strife, even within the movement itself. The Kharijites were the first to introduce the idea that true Muslims could be easily distinguished from the rest by their outward piety and rigid adherence to Islamic law. This notion of purity has had a lasting effect on Islamic thought, as it set the stage for later extremist ideologies that would arise throughout Islamic history. What was it about their belief system that made them so dangerous? The Kharijites emphasized an uncompromising, literal interpretation of the Quran and Hadith, disregarding context and the complexities of religious practice. They believed that anyone who deviated from their understanding of Islam, even in minor ways, was not a true Muslim. This notion led them to take extreme actions. Violence was not only justified, but seen as a righteous act in their eyes. While the Kharijites faded into history, their ideas found a more enduring home in later movements, such as the Takfiris, who shared similar views about excommunicating Muslims they deemed impure. The use of violence to enforce religious orthodoxy became a recurring theme in subsequent centuries, notably with the rise of groups like ISIS in the modern era. One of the most significant aspects of the Kharijite movement was their radical stance on leadership. For them, the caliphate was not a matter of hereditary succession or political stability, but a matter of religious purity. They believed that any ruler who failed to uphold God's law, no matter how legitimate their position, was unworthy of rule and could be justifiably overthrown. This idea of rejecting leadership based on perceived corruption or deviation from religious law resonated throughout Islamic history, especially during times of political turmoil. The Kharijites laid the groundwork for later movements that would challenge established authority, both in the political and religious realms. Even today, there are groups that continue to follow this Kharijite ideology, rejecting mainstream Islamic authorities and striving for a utopian vision of a society governed solely by their understanding of Islamic law. This concept has been used as justification for rebellion against governments in the name of religious purity, even if it means resorting to violence and extremism. While the Kharijites themselves are no longer a prominent force in the Muslim world, their legacy persists in the form of radical movements that reject the unity of the Muslim Ummah. The rise of contemporary extremist groups that claim to act in the name of Islam is a stark reminder of the dangers of rigid interpretations of faith. These modern movements often echo the Kharijites' belief in purity and their readiness to use violence to enforce their version of Islam. They operate under the belief that they alone hold the truth, and they are willing to go to extreme lengths to eliminate anyone who does not share their views. This mentality continues to fuel sectarian violence, division, and instability in the Muslim world. So, what can we learn from the rise of the Kharijites? The Kharijites remind us that extremism can arise not just from external forces, but from within, a radical fringe that emerges when individuals or groups refuse to acknowledge the diversity of thought and practice within Islam. They also warn us about the dangers of using religion as a justification for violence and coercion. At the heart of the Kharijite movement lies a profound lesson about the danger of zealotry, where an intense commitment to a cause, devoid of mercy or compassion, can lead to destructive outcomes. The Kharijites believed that their rigid interpretation of Islam was the only valid one, and they were willing to impose this view at any cost. Their willingness to resort to violence against fellow Muslims is a stark contrast to the compassion, mercy, and tolerance that Islam fundamentally teaches. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs us, "Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good instruction, and argue with them in a way that is best." Quran 16:125. This verse encapsulates the core of the Islamic approach to spreading faith. It is one of wisdom, dialogue, and peaceful persuasion, not coercion or violence. The Kharijites, however, disregarded this principle, believing that their way was the only right path, and that anyone who disagreed was worthy of punishment. Their approach to faith exemplifies a perversion of the true spirit of Islam. The story of the Kharijites challenges us as Muslims to reflect on our own behavior. Are we allowing zealotry to cloud our judgment and interactions with others? Are we quick to label someone as a sinner or non-believer based on a limited understanding of the faith? The Kharijites remind us that while holding firm to our beliefs is important, it should never come at the expense of compassion, tolerance, and mercy, values that are at the very core of Islam. Another crucial lesson from the rise of the Kharijites is the importance of unity within the Muslim community. The Kharijites were not merely a splinter group in the political sense. They symbolized a dangerous fracturing of the Ummah. Islam teaches that the strength of the Muslim community lies in its unity. As the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "The believers are like a structure, each part supporting the other." Sahih Bukhari. The Kharijites, by rejecting the leadership of Caliph Ali, and even going so far as to assassinate him, created a rift that would have long-lasting effects on the Muslim world. This division did not just hurt the immediate political situation, it also laid the groundwork for sectarianism, a problem that continues to plague the Muslim world today. In modern times, we are faced with numerous challenges that threaten our unity as an ummah. Whether it's political divisions, differences in religious interpretations, or external pressures, the need for unity is more urgent than ever. The Kharijites' actions remind us that the pursuit of unity, through tolerance, dialogue, and shared understanding, is essential to the strength and survival of the Muslim community. In today's world, the lessons of the Kharijites are more relevant than ever. Radicalism and extremism are not confined to any one ideology or group, and they can find fertile ground in any religion or belief system. The Kharijites were among the first to use violence in the name of Islam, and their legacy lives on in modern extremist movements. Groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, for instance, use a similar logic, believing that their interpretation of Islam is the only correct one and resorting to violence to enforce it. But what makes the modern situation different is that today, the internet and social media can amplify extremist ideologies, drawing in vulnerable individuals from all corners of the globe. Just as the Kharijites once saw themselves as the sole guardians of the truth, modern-day extremists often see themselves as the only ones who uphold true Islam, using violence to justify their actions. In this light, the Kharijites' story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked radicalism. It teaches us that extremism, whether in the form of violent rebellion, political ideology, or theological purity, will always be detrimental to the community. Islam, as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is a religion of moderation, balance, and peace. So, how can we counter the dangers of extremism in our own time? The answer lies in embracing the values of mercy, compassion, and unity. We must strive to engage with others in a way that reflects the essence of Islam, a faith that encourages peaceful coexistence, respectful dialogue, and the upholding of justice without resorting to violence. Moreover, it is crucial to understand that Islam is not a monolith. There is room for diverse interpretations, and this diversity should be celebrated, not feared. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "The difference of opinion in my community is a mercy." Sunan ibn Majah. This hadith reminds us that differing opinions within Islam should be approached with respect and understanding, not division and violence. It calls for the need to build bridges between the different sects and schools of thought, rather than deepening the divides. In examining the legacy of the Kharijites, one can't help but see the parallels with today's world. Extremism, in various forms, is one of the greatest challenges facing the Muslim world. Just as the Kharijites once believed that their strict, uncompromising view of Islam was the only true interpretation, modern-day extremists claim the same, and are willing to resort to violence to impose their vision of faith. The Kharijites set a dangerous precedent by using violence to enforce religious purity, and this ideology continues to manifest in groups that believe that their narrow understanding of Islam is the only correct one. From the rise of ISIS and Al-Qaeda to other violent extremist movements, these groups, while geographically and ideologically distinct, share a common thread: a radical interpretation of faith that leads them to undermine the unity of the Ummah and to justify violence against fellow Muslims and non-Muslims alike. This growing phenomenon of violent extremism is not just a political issue, it is a religious issue. It undermines the very values that Islam promotes, such as justice, compassion, mercy, and unity. The Kharijites' actions, driven by an unyielding commitment to their interpretation of Islam, are a reminder of the consequences when religious fervor goes unchecked by wisdom, patience, and understanding. It is essential to recognize that extremism does not represent Islam. The vast majority of Muslims around the world reject the radical interpretations promoted by groups like the Kharijites, ISIS, or Al-Qaeda. However, in the face of these challenges, there is often a temptation to view Islam itself as the problem. This is a misconception that has been propagated by both extremists and those who oppose Islam. The rise of extremism has led to widespread misunderstanding and fear of Islam, especially in the West. This is why it is crucial for us, as Muslims, to reaffirm the true values of our faith. Islam is a religion of peace, moderation, and respect for diversity. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is known to have said, "The strong person is not the one who is able to defeat others in wrestling, but the one who controls themselves in times of anger." Sahih Bukhari. This teaching emphasizes self-control and restraint, especially when dealing with conflict. It is a call for Muslims to remain peaceful and to resist the temptation to resort to violence or harshness in the face of challenges. The Kharijites, in their zealous pursuit of purity, failed to heed this wisdom. Their story serves as a warning about the dangers of abandoning moderation in favor of extremism. The rise of extremism in our time also presents a clear challenge to the unity of the Muslim community. The Kharijites, with their rejection of Caliph Ali and their violent ideology, deeply fractured the early Muslim Ummah. This division continues to echo throughout history in the form of sectarianism, conflict, and strife among Muslims. As we look at the state of the Muslim world today, we see deep political, sectarian, and theological divides. These divisions only make it easier for extremist ideologies to take root and for conflicts to fester. This is a direct challenge to the vision of unity that Islam espouses. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Hold fast to the rope of Allah, all of you together, and do not be divided." Quran 3:103. This verse calls for the unity of the Ummah, and it is a call that must ring louder than ever. We, as Muslims, have a collective responsibility to foster unity within our communities. This does not mean that we must all agree on every issue, but it does mean that we must prioritize the values of mutual respect, understanding, and collaboration over division and conflict. So, what can we do to prevent the rise of extremism in our communities? How can we address the lessons of the Kharijites and prevent history from repeating itself? 1. Promote knowledge and education. One of the most powerful tools against extremism is education. Understanding the true teachings of Islam through the study of the Quran, Hadith, and the lives of the early Muslim community is essential. Muslims must be well versed in the principles of justice, mercy, and moderation that are foundational to the faith. 2. Foster dialogue and unity. In a world of increasing division, it is crucial that Muslims engage in open and respectful dialogue with each other, whether it's between different sects of Islam, between Muslims and non-Muslims, or within our own local communities. Promoting unity and understanding is essential to counter the forces of extremism. Third, stand against extremism. Every Muslim has a responsibility to stand against extremism in all its forms. This includes not just denouncing violence, but also speaking out against radical ideologies and supporting initiatives that promote peace and understanding. Extremism is often rooted in ignorance and fear, and as Muslims, we must challenge these forces with knowledge, compassion, and resilience. Fourth, model the prophetic example. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the ultimate example of compassion, mercy, and moderation. By following his example in our daily lives, by embracing kindness, justice, and understanding, we can become active agents of positive change in our communities. The story of the Kharijites is a painful but important chapter in the history of Islam. It serves as both a cautionary tale and a call to action. The rise of extremism in the name of religion, whether it's the Kharijites in the past or modern-day groups, is a reminder that true Islam is not about violence or division, but about mercy, justice, and unity. As we face the challenges of our time, let us remember the lessons of the past and commit ourselves to a future that reflects the true spirit of Islam, a faith of peace, understanding, and solidarity. And let us never forget the words of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The best among you are those who have the best manners and character. Sahih Bukhari. May we all strive to embody the best of this character in our daily lives. As we conclude this deep dive into the story of the Kharijites, we are reminded of the profound lessons this chapter of Islamic history holds for us today. From their rise as the first group to use violence in the name of Islam to their legacy of division and extremism, the Kharijites represent a cautionary tale about the dangers of zealotry, rigidity, and the rejection of mercy in the pursuit of religious purity. We explored how their ideology was rooted in a strict, uncompromising interpretation of Islam, one that led them to excommunicate fellow Muslims and justify violence. Their rebellion against Caliph Ali and the subsequent assassination revealed how the thirst for purity, when unchecked by compassion and understanding, can unravel the unity of the Muslim community. We also examined how their legacy continues to influence modern extremist ideologies, which claim to uphold true Islam while disregarding the values of moderation, peace, and unity. The rise of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda is a tragic reflection of the Kharijites' radical spirit, serving as a stark reminder that extremism, whether from within or outside, remains a threat to the unity and integrity of the Muslim Ummah. Through these lessons, we were reminded of the importance of compassion, dialogue, and respect for diversity in our faith. The Kharijites' story forces us to confront the reality that extremism can arise from within, and we must remain vigilant against such forces in our own time. Unity among Muslims is paramount. It is a collective responsibility to promote peace, understanding, and mutual respect, as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, exemplified in his life. In the end, the Kharijites' story is not just a relic of the past, but a reminder of the values we must uphold today. As Muslims, it is our duty to stand against extremism in all its forms, to promote a version of Islam that is based on justice, mercy, and moderation. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever shows you a path of righteousness, follow it, and whoever shows you a path of misguidance, stay away from it." Sahih Muslim. Let this be a guiding principle in our efforts to safeguard the unity of the Ummah, to educate others on the true teachings of Islam, and to combat the spread of radical ideologies. The strength of the Muslim community lies in its ability to come together in peace and cooperation, to value the diversity within our ranks, and to strive toward the greater good of humanity. As we reflect on the story of the Kharijites, let us remember that true Islam is not about division, violence, or the imposition of one's beliefs on others. It is about peace, mercy, and understanding, values that are timeless and universal. Let us be the generation that rises above the temptations of extremism, that learns from the past, and that builds a future rooted in the true spirit of Islam. And hold fast, all of you together, to the rope of Allah, and be not divided among yourselves. Quran 3:103. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all to the straight path, protect us from extremism, and help us build a united, compassionate, and peaceful Ummah. Ameen. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video, and be sure to subscribe for more in-depth explorations of Islamic history and thought. May peace and blessings be upon you all.